I don't normally eavesdrop on other people's conversations, and to this day I'm not sure why I listened in on this one. It was a quiet Sunday, and I was down in the basement working on the water heater when the phone rang. I had no clue what Sarah, my wife, was up to at the time, and since the phone was right next to me, I grabbed the receiver. Before I could even say hello, I heard Sarah's voice upstairs. "Brandon, you should be calling here," she said, her tone low and nervous. "What?" If Alex had picked up, I'd have just said it was work-related, Brandon replied, sounding completely unfazed. "Relax, you're too jittery. I just wanted to confirm everything's set for tomorrow. Meet me at the desk Motel, room 117 at exactly 1:00 in the afternoon. I'll bring chilled wine and some fresh strawberries, and forget to wear that black silk lingerie you told me about." "Okay," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "Just make sure no one sees us leaving work or coming back together." "You sound nervous," Brandon teased. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," Sarah replied quickly. "I'm fine. It's just I've never done anything like this before, so yeah, I'm scared. But I'm not backing out. It'll be fine. I promise." "All right," Brandon said, his voice softening. "But if Alex ever finds out about this, I'll end it immediately. I've got to go before he overhears. See you tomorrow at 1:00, Sarah confirmed, and then the line went dead. I slowly hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. For the next 10 minutes, I just sat there replaying the conversation in my head. Why on earth had I answered that damn phone? Sarah and I had been together for what felt like forever. We'd grown up in the same small town and got married just a year after graduating high school. She was the only girl I'd ever been with, and I always believed I was the only guy she'd ever been with too. She was attractive with a figure that still turned heads, and we had one son, Noah, who was now in high school. Our life wasn't flashy, but it was steady, or so I thought. I tried to shake off the disbelief. Maybe everything wasn't as perfect as I'd convinced myself it was. Grabbing a cold beer from the basement fridge, I let the buzz take the edge off while I considered my options. First, I could confront her head-on and turn this into some big emotional showdown. That idea didn't sit right with me. Second, I could drop hints or say something that might make her think I suspected something. It seemed more subtle, but also pointless. Delaying the inevitable wouldn't help me. Was to let her go through with her plan, but with a twist. I could play along until the last moment, giving her one final chance to back out. If she took it, fine. If not, I'd act. I figured she'd likely go one of three ways. Might be by some miracle she'd change her mind and leave. Unlikely. Or she might take the last chance I'd give her. That felt like a coin toss. But the most probable outcome, she'd go through with it. As much as I hated to admit it, that was what I expected. Once I had a plan in mind, I started to feel a strange sense of control. If this was going to happen, I'd make sure I was the one pulling the strings. After dinner, I began working out the details. First, I needed more information. Then I'd come up with a game plan. I spent almost 20 years working for a security systems company, so I knew a thing or two about gathering intel. My employer had been pushing me to take a position in Huntsville, Alabama for the past year, but Sarah had been dead against the move. She'd been working at an insurance company for the last decade, and things were going well for her there. I never liked the guy she worked with, Brandon Adams, and now my gut instinct about him was proving to be spot on. Brandon was married too, and his wife seemed like a decent person. The thought of him creeping into my marriage made my blood boil. Moving to Alabama would be good for Noah as well. He had his sights set on Auburn, and in-state tuition would save us a fortune compared to out-of-state rates. My old friend Carter had been after me to join him at his security firm in Huntsville for years. He'd been offering me a partnership position with better pay and benefits than my current job. I'd always declined out of loyalty to Sarah and our life here. But now that loyalty seemed misplaced while we were eating dinner. I made up my mind I'd take the job in Huntsville no matter what. The next day I tell my employer I was accepting the position and start packing. I didn't see any need to tell Sarah about it just yet, but I did bring it up with Noah after dinner. Noah and I always got along great, and when I explained my plan to head to Alabama ahead of the family, he thought it was a solid idea. He promised not to mention it to his mom. I didn't fill him in on what I knew about her plans for the next day. I wasn't even sure how I'd handle it myself. Quick run to Home Depot and left the house. My first stop was to buy a prepaid cell phone with a 60-minute card. I didn't want any calls I made traced back to me. After that, I swung by a local bar where I knew a couple of old buddies who I knew a couple of old buddies. Didn't exactly keep their noses clean for $400. I walked out with 2 big bags of low-grade weed. My old friend Dylan gave me a weary look when I handed over the cash. You know buying this much weed is risky. You know buying this much weed is risky. Charge you with dealing. I just smirked and waved him off. That's kind of the idea, I said, leaving him puzzled. At the bar, there was a guy named Mac Ryder. I didn't know him personally, but his reputation did all the talking. He was the kind of guy you avoided unless you were looking for trouble. He had a bad attitude, a short fuse, and a history that made people steer clear. I spotted his Corvette parked outside as I was leaving. A quick idea struck me, so I grabbed a screwdriver from my car. Within seconds, I had his license plate off his car. It was quick, clean, and left no trace. I knew where he worked, so I planned to make use of this little souvenir in the morning. My next stop was the Desk Motel. Inside the lobby, I took my time pretending to browse the racks of brochures advertising local attractions and restaurants. After picking up a few of them, I chatted briefly with the desk clerk, who handed me a map of the property and a list of property useful numbers including housekeeping and room service. When I got back home, Sarah was curled up on the couch watching TV. I told her I had some paperwork to handle at the office. She barely glanced at me, saying she was planning to take a cold shower and head to bed early because she had a busy day tomorrow. While she was in the shower, I seized my chance. I opened her briefcase and found her planner and address book. Flipping through them, I wrote down every name and number that seemed relevant. The next step was mind-numbing. I spent the better part of an hour programming all those numbers into the disposable phone and my own. I even dug out the phone book to look up a few more numbers to make sure I wasn't missing anything. By the time I finally dropped onto the couch, I felt ready for what was coming, even if my nerves were shot. It was a tough night. My mind wouldn't stop racing as I replayed everything Sarah had said and done. What had I done wrong? How had we ended up here? Eventually, I convinced myself it was my fault somehow, that I must have failed her in ways I hadn't even realized. When morning came, I was running on fumes, but managed to brew coffee and set the table. Sarah came downstairs looking absolutely radiant, dressed sharper than usual. It caught me off guard. "Wow, you look incredible," I said, doing my best to sound casual. "What's the occasion?" She gave me a smug smile. "What do you mean? I always look this good." We sat down to read the paper and sip our coffee. But the conversation was strained. It was polite, surface level, but far from normal. I couldn't tell if she was anxious, excited, or just pretending nothing was out of the ordinary. "I've got a full schedule today," I said after a while. "Might not be home for dinner." "That's fine," she replied, barely looking up. "I'll make something easy. Anything in particular you'd like?" "Doesn't matter, whatever's fine," I muttered, barely able to look at her. It was all so forced, so artificial. We both knew what was really going on, but acted like we were walking on glass, afraid to let anything slip. I got to work earlier than usual and immediately set the wheels in motion for my transfer to Huntsville. I signed all the necessary paperwork, cleaned out my desk, and made a quick stop at a divorce lawyer's office. I picked up all the forms and information I'd need if things didn't play out the way I hoped. Back at the house, I got to work packing. I emptied my clothes closet and dresser, loading everything into the car. Then I removed the hard drive from my computer and collected every document and file I thought might come in handy. Most of our savings were tied up in collectible coins, so I packed those up too. Once the banks opened, I drove straight there. I closed out our accounts and canceled every credit card. Maybe I was jumping the gun, but I didn't have much faith that Sarah would change her mind. Before heading to the motel, I made one last stop, a flower shop. I ordered a dozen red roses to be delivered to room 117 at 1:15 p.m. To be everything, by 12:30, I was parked outside the motel, tucked away in a spot that gave me a clear view of the room without making me too obvious. A few minutes later, Brandon showed up. He stepped out of his car carrying a grocery bag, which probably had strawberries, wine, and whatever else he thought would impress her. He went into the room and came back out shortly after to fill the ice bucket. While he was setting up, I started making calls. "Hi, I'd like to order a large pepperoni pizza for delivery to room 117 at the Desk Motel. I might be in the shower, so make sure the driver knocks loud enough for me to hear. 20 minutes is fine. After that, I called Pa John's, Domino's, and Godfather's Pizza, placing the same order at each one. Then, for good measure, I called the Golden Dragon and ordered egg rolls and sweet and sour pork. I figured some of the restaurants might call back to confirm the orders, but that didn't matter. The chaos didn't matter. Still, serve its purpose. Sarah pulled into the parking lot just as I was finishing up. She parked far from the room, likely trying to be discreet. Carrying a small overnight bag, she walked toward the door. When she was about 20 feet away, I dialed her number. "Hi, honey," I said as casually as I could. "Alex, what's going on? You don't usually call me at work in the middle of the day." "No reason," I replied smoothly. "Just wanted to say I love you." "Oh, Alex, that's so sweet," Sarah replied, her voice softening. "I love you too. All right, I'll let you get back to work. See you later. Bye." "Goodbye, Sarah, and thanks for taking my call," I said, my tone calm despite the storm inside me. I listened as she hung up, then watched as she turned and entered the motel room. That was it. Her last chance, and she had made her choice. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I swallowed the lump in my throat and refocused on the task at hand. I picked up the disposable phone and resumed my string of calls. The next number I dialed was for the local TV station. "Hello, is this WSTV? There's something unusual going on at the Desk Motel. If you've got a news truck in the area, you might want to check it out." "No, I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but I know the police are already on their way." I hung up before they're on their way. Could ask more questions. Next, I approached Brandon's car, thankful that he parked in a spot where I could work unnoticed. Pulling the license plate from my pocket, I quickly swapped it out for the one I'd taken from Mac's Corvette. On my way back to my car, I made another call, this time to Sarah's office. "Hello, this is Rob Flores," I said, imitating a polite tone. "I had a meeting scheduled with Sarah Mitchell at 3:00, but I need to reschedule soon as possible at 961 4,452. I've been trying to reach her, but her line's been busy." The number I left wasn't mine, of course. It was from a divorce law firm's advertisement. After hanging up, I tossed Brandon's license plate under his car as a final touch. Then I took Sarah's car and parked it discreetly at the back of the motel. On my way back to my own car, I made another call, this time to Brandon's wife. "Hello, Mrs. Adams. Your husband asked me to reach out to you. He's having some car trouble and needs you to pick him up at the Desk Motel, room 117. You can reach him on his cell or call the room directly. The number is 961-7770, extension 117. No, I'm not sure why he didn't call you himself. It seemed like he was meeting with a client, an attractive one. Bye." After that, I called Mac's boss at Acme Welding. "Hi, this is a concerned citizen. There's a white Honda in the Desk Motel parking lot with Mac Ryder's license plate on it. You might want to let him know. It could be important." The next call was to the police. "Hi, I'd like to report something suspicious at the Desk Motel. It looks like a couple of kids are swapping license plates on cars in the parking lot. It just doesn't seem right. Could you send someone to check it out?" The car in question has the plate from Mac Ryder's Corvette. As I kept an eye on the motel room, the first pizza delivery guy arrived. He knocked on the door, and after a short argument, Brandon reluctantly paid him and sent him on his way. Smirking, I placed another call, this time to Sarah's mother. "Hi, Mom. It's Alex. I don't have much time to talk, but I need you to do something for me. Sarah is at a motel right now having an affair with one of her co-workers. Please, I'm begging you, call her and talk some sense into her. The number for her cell is in your contacts, but if you can't reach her there, try the motel. She's in room 117. I'm sorry for dropping this on you, but I've got to go." Meanwhile, 2 more pizza delivery drivers arrived at the room, along with a housekeeper carrying extra towels. An argument broke out at the door as Brandon tried to manage the chaos. I made my next call to the motel directly. "Hi, this is Mr. 117. There's a leak under the bathroom sink, and the water is starting to soak into the carpet. Could you send someone right away? Thanks." The sound of a loud motorcycle caught my attention as Mac pulled into the parking lot on his Harley. He stopped behind Brandon's car. Clearly agitated, But before he could do anything, a police cruiser arrived. I watched as Mac and the officer got into a heated exchange. Still seated in my car, I placed another call, this time to Sarah's boss. "Hello, Mr. Nelson. This is Alex Mitchell, Sarah's husband. I wanted to let you know about a situation. Sarah is currently at the Desk Motel in room 117 with Brandon Adams. They're having an affair." "Yes, I'm certain, and I know your company has strict policies about this sort of behavior. You should be able to reach them on their cell phones or call the motel directly at 961-770, extension 117. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I don't want my wife working for your company any longer. If this violates company policy, I assume Brandon should face the consequences too. Thank you for your time." I hung up and turned my attention back to the motel. A delivery driver from the Chinese restaurant was arguing with Brandon at the door, while the maintenance guy arrived to fix the sink. Mac, meanwhile, was gesturing wildly at the police officer, clearly trying to explain something. I placed another call, this time to Sarah's sister. "Hi, Jessica. It's Alex. I've got a situation here. Sarah is at a motel sleeping with a guy she works with. I'm heading home to grab my Ruger and planning to come back and shoot them both. But I'd rather not have the police or reporters find her undressed. Could you call her and tell her to put on some clothes? She's in room 117 at the Desk Motel. If you can't reach her on her cell, call the room directly." "Oh, and I moved her car to the back of the motel so she might need help getting home. Might be you could go pick her up before I get there. For helping. Jessica, let me know how it goes." By now, the scene outside room 117 was utter chaos. The maintenance worker was trying to get inside. The delivery guy was demanding payment, and the cop was heading toward the room with Mac 8, yelling and gesturing beside him. While Mac and the police officer were locked in a heated exchange with Brandon, a florist stood at the motel room door, awkwardly attempting to deliver the roses. It didn't look like anyone inside was paying attention. I figured my work here was done. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I passed a TV crew unloading their gear from a van. Driving away, I realized I still had the 2 bags of weed sitting in the car. My original plan was to plant them in Brandon's vehicle, but that idea no longer seemed worth the risk. On the way home, I pulled over at a bridge and tossed both the weed and the prepaid cell phone into the river, watching them disappear into the water. I felt a strange mix of relief and regret. When I got home, I stopped just long enough to say goodbye to Noah. I told him I'd stay in touch and promised I wouldn't cause his mother any trouble for the next few days. As I walked out the door, I wished more than anything that I could know what had happened inside that motel room over the past hour. As I left town, I decided to make one last call. I wasn't sure if it would go through, but I dialed anyway. "Hello, Brandon Adams speaking." He answered cautiously. "This is Alex Mitchell," I said, my voice steady. "I just wanted to let you know if you so much as lay a hand on my wife, I'll rip your balls off and shove them down your throat. Do I make myself clear?" A faint, shaky reply came through the line. "Yes, I understand." I hung up without another word and hit the highway. About 8 hours later, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Sarah's name. "Hello, Alex, where are you?" Her voice was uncertain, almost pleading. "I'm on I-81 near Knoxville. Why?" "Alex, what's going on? We need to talk?" "There's nothing to talk about, Sarah," I replied coldly. "But I'll ask you 3 questions. Give me direct answers to all of them, and then we'll see, okay?" "Okay," she said hesitantly. "What did I say to you when I called your cell today?" You said I love you, and what did you do after you hung up?" I asked. A pause. Then, in a quiet voice, she admitted, "I went into the motel room." "Why did you go into the motel room, Sarah?" Silence. "Answer me, Sarah. Why did you go into the motel room?" More silence. "Goodbye, Sarah." I hung up the phone and turned it off. I wouldn't need it for the rest of my trip. Since my company was covering the relocation expenses, I booked a decent motel room for the night and treated myself to a proper dinner. Over the next 2 days, I stayed focused on settling in. Apartment hunting turned out to be easier than I'd expected, and I quickly found a place that was affordable and met my needs. Carter was thrilled when I called to accept his job offer. "About damn time," he laughed. "I've had your office ready for months." His support made the transition smoother, and having an old friend nearby helped ease the loneliness of starting over. I took care of all the Essentials: setting up phone service, registering my car with a new title, getting a driver's license, and filing a residency declaration. Once I had everything squared away, I mailed off the paperwork to start the divorce process. It all went smoother than I'd anticipated. When I was finally settled, I called Noah and gave him my new number. I asked him not to share it with his mother, though I said I'd understand if she managed to pressure him. He didn't think it would be an issue. During the call, he mentioned that Sarah had lost her job and was struggling with depression. "Do you two need anything?" I asked, feeling a pang of guilt. "No, we're okay," he replied, though I could sense his concern for her. Noah became my only connection to my old life. A few weeks later, he told me Sarah had received the divorce papers and signed them. Immediately, "I don't think she even read them," he said. Over the following months, she began selling her belongings piece by piece. Every couple of weeks, she'd hold a yard sale, getting rid of anything that wasn't essential. She even stopped wearing makeup and began selling her clothes and jewelry. When the house finally went up for sale, she listed it so low that it sold almost immediately. The deal included an agreement that she and Noah could stay until he finished high school, which the buyers readily accepted. Shortly after Noah graduated, Sarah moved into a tiny apartment within walking distance of the bakery where she found work. It was a small, bare-bones place, and Noah described it as looking more like a monk's cell than a home. She left behind most of the furniture, only keeping what she absolutely needed. Noah helped her move before leaving for Auburn. By then, she'd gotten rid of nearly everything from our old life. He told me she deprived herself of almost everything, even while making sure he never went without. I could tell he was worried about her, but there wasn't much I could do. Years flew by. Auburn was a 4-hour drive from my new home, and I rarely saw Noah. He was busy with school, and I poured myself into work, avoiding dating or socializing. I had no interest in building new connections. When Noah's graduation day arrived, I made the trip to see him receive his diploma. Sarah was there too, and we ended up sitting next to each other. She looked different. She seemed older, worn down by life, without makeup or much self-care. There was a sadness about her, but she still managed to smile when she saw me, and we exchanged a quiet hello. The ceremony started, and soon they began calling names for the diplomas. We didn't have much time for conversation, but even if we had, I don't think either of us would have known what to say. It was all over. The tension broke as Noah walked over to greet us. Noah was over the moon about graduating, his excitement pouring out in a non-stop stream of chatter. He talked a mile a minute, and I couldn't help but smile as I watched him soak up every second of his big moment. A few of his friends stopped by to introduce themselves, and before long, the entire group was heading off to Gulf Shores to celebrate. That left Sarah and me standing there alone, an awkward silence stretching between us. "How'd you get here?" I asked, breaking the ice. "Bus," she said with a shrug. "I've got a round-trip ticket, but I need to be back at the station by 6. She hesitated. "Could you give me a ride?" "Sure," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I took the week off," she continued, "but I don't have much planned. I'll probably head back tonight and spend the rest of the week painting my apartment." I raised an eyebrow. "Painting your apartment sounds like a thrilling vacation." She laughed. "Dry. What else am I going to do?" "You could stay with me for a few days," I offered. "I could even drive you back after if you want." "It's better than taking the bus." She hesitated again. Her expression conflicted. "Anything's better than the bus," she admitted, "but I don't think staying with you would be a good idea. It would probably just make things harder for both of us." Her honesty hit me like a gut punch, but I nodded, forcing a small smile. "I get that," I said quietly. "We never really talked. You know, after everything happened, I was so angry back then. Cut you off completely. I didn't give you a chance to explain, and I've regretted it for years." Her eyes narrowed slightly, her voice turning sharp. "And now, after all these years, you want me to explain? After everything's been destroyed? What's the point, Alex? Isn't it too late?" "My bad, it is," I admitted. "But if there's something you've been holding on to, I'll listen this time." She sighed heavily, looking away. "I don't know what I could possibly say now to make things better. You didn't listen before." "Why wouldn't listen before? You listen now." I met her gaze, steady and sincere. "I don't know why, but even if we don't figure everything out, I'd still enjoy spending a few days with you. Are you sure you can't give it a try?" She studied me for a long moment, then finally sighed. "I didn't bring anything with me," she said softly. "Just the clothes on my back. I wasn't planning to stay overnight." "Then we'll make a quick stop at Walmart," I suggested. "I'll make a quick stop at Walmart," I suggested. "Get you a few things, clothes, whatever you need. It's a 4-hour drive, and honestly, I could use the company." She bit her lip, clearly torn, before nodding. "Fine," she said reluctantly. "I'll give it a try, but if you say or do anything to upset me, I'll leave. No warnings, no second chances." "Fair enough," I said. "My car is just over there." The first few miles of the drive passed in intense silence. Eventually, we stopped just outside Birmingham, where I bought her some essentials. A few changes of clothes, sneakers, and some basic toiletries. She refused to buy any makeup, and I didn't push, though I did make a lighthearted comment about it. Further down the road, we stopped at a Cracker Barrel for dinner. It was one of her old favorites, and I figured it might bring back some happier memories. As we got back on the road, cruising up I-65, she finally broke the silence. "It was for sex?" she said out of nowhere, her voice barely above a whisper. I glanced at her, confused. "What was for sex?" Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "The answer to the last question you asked me when you called me that day and asked why I went into the motel room. It was to have sex." I stayed quiet, letting her gather her thoughts, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. She continued. "I don't know why. Maybe I was too ashamed, or maybe I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had. But after you hung up, I realized everything was over. My life, my marriage, everything. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, struggling to keep my emotions in check. You broke my heart, Sarah." I said finally. "I know," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "And I don't know how to fix it. I've spent countless nights lying awake, trying to figure out how to make things right, but there's nothing I can do." I took a deep breath. "Why didn't you stop yourself?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Why didn't you stop me?" "I couldn't stop you," I said firmly. "Only you could do that? You could have said something," she pressed, her voice rising. "No," I said, shaking my head. "You might have stopped? Sure. But for the wrong I knew, you might have stopped? Sure. Reasons: fear of getting caught, fear of being exposed. Those aren't good enough reasons. You should have stopped because you knew it was wrong. That's the only reason that matters." She nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "I understand," she said softly, "but I still wish you'd said something." "I did," I said, "when I called you that day and told you I loved you." She closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "That was the test," she said, and I failed it. God, I was such a fool. I didn't argue. "Did you love him?" I asked after a moment. "Brandon." "God, no," she said emphatically. "Brandon loved his wife as much as I loved you. We were just friends." "Then why?" I asked, my voice laced with frustration. "Why did you end up in a motel room together?" She sighed deeply, staring out the window. "It's a long story," she said, "but we've got time." "Start from the beginning," I said. She nodded, her voice quiet and reflective. "Brandon and I had been working together for almost a year. Over time, we started talking about work, life, family, even sex. We realized that neither of us had ever been with anyone other than our spouses. It wasn't like we were unhappy or dissatisfied, but we got curious. And the more we talked about it, the more comfortable we got with the idea." "Comfortable with what?" I asked, my tone sharp. "With trying it," she admitted. "Not as an affair, not as something ongoing. Just once. A no strings attached kind of thing." It was stupid, I know. Like two kids playing doctor. She laughed bitterly. "Ridiculous it sounds, but that's how it happened." "Did you even think about the consequences?" I asked, my anger bubbling to the surface. "No," she said quietly. "Neither of us did. Once it got to the point where it felt no different than going to a movie," Sarah said softly. "I thought you'd never find out, so I figured you wouldn't be hurt. I was wrong. I'm so sorry, Alex." "And Brandon's wife?" I asked. "She was planning to divorce him," she admitted. "But I told her everything, like I'm telling you now. She didn't go through with it, but their marriage never recovered. Brandon and I were both fired. And though he fought it, Theo, Bored didn't buy his argument that we never actually had sex. He moved to Baltimore, and I haven't seen him since. We fell silent as I pulled into the driveway. The tension between us thick. I showed Sarah to my room and took the guest room, wishing her good night. Tomorrow would bring more conversations, hopefully less painful. The next morning, I found her waiting at the breakfast table. "So tell me about the sex with Brandon," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You know there wasn't any sex," she snapped. "You ruined everything, answering all those calls and sending people to knock on the door. The closest we got was me taking off my shoes. Did you have a bad time?" I asked with a smirk. "It was miserable," she admitted. When I saw my car was gone, I broke down crying, and then Jessica showed up. "Oh, and my mom still won't talk to me because of your calls. I'm sorry," I said lightly. "I take full responsibility for ruining your big day." "No," she said firmly. "This is all on me. When I walked into that room, I lost all my self-respect. At least your calls saved my virtue. For that, I'm grateful. But I'll never forgive myself for what I did." "Sarah, you never lost my love," I said quietly. She smiled sadly. "That's good to hear, Alex. But what about our marriage?" I hesitated. "That's gone, and I don't know how to bring it back." "I understand," she said with a nod. "That's fair. So, what's for lunch? How about sushi?" I suggested. After lunch, we shopped for clothes, and I convinced her to buy a few things that suited her better. That evening, over a simple dinner and wine, Sarah began to relax, letting her guard down. "Are we going to have sex tonight?" she asked suddenly. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm afraid I won't stop thinking about you and Brandon." "That's nonsense," she said. "You told me once that you fantasized about Pam Kramer when we first started dating. I dealt with that for years. Now it's your turn to deal with it." I blinked, stunned. "Did I really say that?" "You did," she said with a sly smile. "And now, who do you fantasize about?" "Most of the time it's you," I admitted reluctantly. "And the rest?" she pressed. "Mel Brown," I muttered. Her laughter filled the room. "Mel Brown? Seriously? Why? The man's a legend," I said, grinning. She laughed harder. "Well, that explains a lot, but it raises another question. Who have you been thinking about over the past 5 years when you've been, relieving tension?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Mostly you," I admitted honestly. "You're in my thoughts a lot. Now it's your turn." "Who else?" She hesitated before answering. "Sometimes I think about you and Brandon together." I blinked, completely caught off guard. "Wait, you fantasize about me and Brandon? That's twisted." Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.